come and discover Portugal with us. Please like, subscribe, and leave your comment. Your support and opinions are very important to us. Thank you. The Sintra Mountains have occupied a very special place since ancient times, being given the name Mons Sacer, Sacred Mount, by the Roman authors Marcus Terentius Varro and Columella. In his geography, Ptolemy referred to this elevation as Selenes Oros, the Mountain of the Moon, a name that still lingers in cultural memory today. A place of myth and legend, it was here that mares fertilized by Zephyrus, the Greek god of the west wind, were said to roam, giving birth to foals faster than the wind. Human communities settled in this region early on, leaving traces of their presence at least since the Neolithic period. Sites such as the Monge Tholos, a prehistoric tomb located on the third highest point of this mountain range, are signs of the importance that this elevation has acquired in the imagination of man for millennia. The Romans worshipped here at sites such as the Shrine to the Sun and Moon at Praia das Maçãs, where centuries later the Muslims established a ribat to celebrate their faith. The mild climate of the Sintra Mountains attracted the Portuguese nobility from an early age, who built their palaces here to retreat during the hottest periods of the year. The best example of this is the Sintra National Palace, a complex that has developed with alterations and additions over more than 5 centuries. The ethereal aura of these forests and rocks would have its apex in the 19th century, with the rise of Romanticism and the affirmation of Sintra as the glorious Eden, as described by the British poet Lord Byron. Throughout this landscape, impressive palaces of revivalist architecture emerge, revealing the period's fascination with the Middle Ages, the fantastic worlds of literature, and the deep esotericism that permeated the thinking of their owners. The exuberance of palaces such as Montserrat, Setiais or Regaleira is only overshadowed by the colourful drama of the Pena Palace, which stands majestically in the Sintra landscape. There are monuments that impress with their grandeur, their artistic and architectural splendor. The Capuchos convent, by contrast, marvels us with its endearing simplicity and modesty. Founded in 1560 by the Capuchin Franciscan friars from the Arrábida Mountains, where they built another remarkable convent overlooking the sea, it was sponsored by Álvaro de Castro. Son of João de Castro, 4th Viceroy of India and owner of the Quinta da Penha Verde in Sintra, and Leonor Coutinho, he was Captain Major of the Indian Sea and ambassador to Rome and Madrid during the reign of Sebastian, King of Portugal. The founding legend of this convent tells that during a hunt in the Sintra Mountains, João de Castro got lost and ended up falling asleep under a cliff due to exhaustion. In a dream, he was told that a Christian temple needed to be built there. He eventually passed on this duty to his son, Álvaro de Castro, who founded the Capuchos convent there. It was originally named the Convent of the Holy Cross of the Sintra Mountains. Its construction follows the ideals and philosophy of the Franciscan order, which sought spiritual perfection through detachment from the world and renunciation of the pleasures of earthly life. Tradition has it that in 1581 King Philip I visited this convent and said, "In all my kingdom I have two things that please me very much, the Escorial because it is so rich, and the convent of the Holy Cross because it is so poor." The convent is composed by a group of scattered buildings that rise up among the vegetation and the large rocks without any architectural or decorative ostentation. Its various units are built around courtyards and include everything necessary for monastic life, from chapels to the chapter house, from the apothecary to the infirmary and the friars' cells. The entrance is through a passage under two cliffs, which leads to the courtyard of the crosses and further on to the courtyard of the fountain. This fountain has panels of blue and yellow tiles on a white background at the bottom. The upper section still has some of its naive decoration, made up of multicolored shells and pebbles embedded in its surface. A niche appears in the center. The entrance to the monastic buildings is through a porch with a slab floor containing traces of two tombs and a cork-lined roof. In the center stands an indented structure with a three-centered arched niche in the middle, which was decorated with pebbles and ceramic fragments. On the left wall is the door leading into the church, topped by an inscribed marble stone and a cross made of shells and pebbles, as well as a bas-relief depicting the Virgin and the Child. Lastly, there is the access door to the convent, also known as the Door of Death. In the middle we can see a large wooden cross framed by pebbles and shells. On the right-hand wall there is a bas-relief depicting the Virgin and Child, who rests his hand on the head of the founder Álvaro de Castro. Above, within a triangular pediment, the Christ Pantocrator appears. On this side there is an access door to the Chapel of the Lord of the Steps, or of the Passion of Christ, with decoration that contrasts sharply with the simplicity and even roughness of the rest of the convent. It is completely covered in blue tiles on a white background, dating from the 18th century, and there is a niche with a round arch in the middle where an image of the Lord of the Steps once stood. The tiles depict scenes from the flagellation of Christ and the crowning of thorns on the walls, and the symbols of the Passion and stars on the roof, which is barrel vaulted. The ceiling of the porch, lined with the ubiquitous cork, depicts flower motifs. The interior of the convent is made up of various rooms arranged along narrow corridors, connected to each other by stairs that overcome the slope of the land. The ceilings are covered in cork and the openings and doors are molded with the same material. The floors are slabbed. Next to the entrance are some lodgings for visiting religionists. At the end of the corridor is the chapter room, where the religious community used to meet. Its access door is decorated with cork and has a niche lined with tiles, where there used to be an image of Our Lady of Sorrows. The refectory has a large slab that was used as a table, which was extracted in the mountains and given to the friars by Henry, King of Portugal, around 1580. There is a small built-in cupboard in the wall and a small opening with a cork frame and tiled parapet which communicates with the kitchen, which has an oven and chimney, as well as stone stools and cupboards built into the walls. The kitchen is surprisingly large, given that it only served a community of 8 friars who ate an almost entirely vegetarian diet. This compartment may have been expanded at a later date when donations to the convent allowed food to be shared with the poor and pilgrims, justifying such a large cooker. The water used to wash the containers and utensils was then reused to irrigate the gardens. There are a total of 8 small individual cells reserved for the friars, with tiled floors, accessible through small doors that invite us to genuflect. The cell corridor, which winds between rocks, was restricted to the friars who lived here. The interior of the cell was a place where the religious could be alone with God. The friars didn't sleep in beds, but on the floor of the small cells, where they were only allowed the comfort of a straw mat or a corkboard. The convent also had a windowless chamber called the penance room, reserved for complete seclusion in the dark for meditation and reflection without any distractions. The complex included cells for the sick, separate from those of the friars, as well as the apothecary's room, where medicines were stored. Next to the entrance there is a brazier, where the water used to prepare medicinal tisanes was boiled, and possibly aromatic herbs were burned to purify the air. There was also a library, which housed a considerable collection of books, the whereabouts of which are unknown following the extinction of the religious orders in the 19th century, when the convent's contents were sold at public auction. Accessible through an exterior corridor is the washroom, which has a spring and a tank from which water was distributed to the entire convent. It also has a water tank and latrines. In the cloister, which is walled off, there is an octagonal fountain in the center. It is surrounded by a dense forest made up of native vegetation, a privileged space for contemplation. Here we can find the herbarium, a laboratory where aromatic and medicinal plants were used to make preparations for treating the friars. Inside we can still see a set of braziers that were used in this process. There is also a granary here, where the convent's provisions were kept. This space is now occupied by the exhibition area of the Kapuścisz convent, where some pieces collected during archaeological excavations are on display. In this cloister, the chapel of St. Anthony, or of the Lord of the Garden, stands out. Its facade faces the courtyard, and its entrance is preceded by a small porch, accessible via a staircase. On the wall to the left of the portal is a mural painting depicting St. Francis, and on the wall to the right is another painting depicting St. Anthony. These paintings, which date back to the 17th century, are attributed to the artist André Reynaud. The interior is rectangular in plan and is lit by an oculus above the portal. The walls feature mural paintings that extend to the barrel-vaulted roof. The altarpiece is made up of a niche carved into the rock wall with a round arch, and below it a frontal covered in blue tiles on a white background depicting two winged angels holding an inscribed cartouche. The entire building complex of the Capuchos convent is surrounded by a verdant landscape, where we can discover traces of the friar's life, from a bread oven to the stone walls that limited the convent area, but also staircases and paths where the stone so abundant in the Sintra Mountains was used. This existence in harmony with the natural landscape has particular expression in the Chapel of the Crucified Lord, located at the highest point of the convent's enclosure, which took advantage of a cave naturally formed between huge boulders, using a rock as an altar. The ocean is visible from here. Also isolated in the middle of the grove is the hermitage of Ecce Homo, which contains an image symbolizing the moment when Pontius Pilate presented Christ to the people, saying, "Ecce Homo, behold the man." In another hidden corner of the forest is Friar Honorio's cave, a rocky concavity that Friar Honorio de Santa Maria is said to have chosen as his place of seclusion for 3 decades instead of his cell in the convent. On top of this small cave there is a cross and an inscription that records this event. 2 legends have Friar Honorio as their protagonist, in both of which he is confronted by the devil, protecting himself with the sign of the cross against the fire that was raging in the mountains in one of them, and, in another version, against the temptation of a sinful woman. Both are, after all, metaphors for the Franciscan friar's daily struggle against the hardships of a life exposed to the elements and, at the same time, against the temptations that lead to sin. The Chapel of Our Lady of Pena, later Peninha, was founded in 1690 by Friar Pedro da Conceição under the royal patronage of King Peter II of Portugal. Standing at an altitude of 488 meters, it offers views of an extensive landscape that stretches from the Arrábida Mountains and Cape Especial in the south to Cape Carvoeiro and the Berlengas Islands in the north. Its position exposes it to strong sea winds and fog often forms. The drama and grandeur of this natural landscape have certainly played a central role in its occupation since distant times. The construction of the Chapel of Our Lady of Peninha is associated with a legend that dates back to the 16th century and was first recorded in writing in 1707 by Friar Agostinho de Santa Maria. The story goes that during the reign of King John III of Portugal, there was a mute shepherdess in the place of Almoinhas Velhas de Malveira who used to graze a flock of sheep in the hills. One day, a white sheep from her flock ran away, stopping only at the top of a cliff, which, because it was smaller than others in that rocky mountain range, they called Peninha, small crag. The shepherdess, all tearful from the excessive labor she had been put through, reached the top of the rock and saw a very beautiful girl standing next to the sheep, who asked her what she was looking for. The little girl then asked the shepherdess to go to her mother and ask her for some bread. At a time of great wheat shortages and famine, the shepherdess told her that her mother had no bread. The girl told her again that she should go home and ask her mum for bread, because there would be plenty of loaves in a little chest there. The shepherdess went home and called for her mother, who didn't recognize her voice because she had been mute until then. Such was the commotion generated by the miraculous event that the neighbors also came, and it was confirmed that there were 5 or 6 loaves of bread in the aforementioned chests. The next day, the little shepherd's parents and neighbors went up to Peninha to look for the girl, discovering a crevice between the rocks where an image of the lady was hidden, which is still venerated there today. The image was placed in the chapel of Saint Saturnin, located below Peninha. However, the statue disappeared from the chapel 3 times, reappearing on the cliff where it was originally found. The people then erected a dry stone hermitage at the top of Peninha, where the chapel that can still be seen today would later be built. A second version of the legend refers to 6 sailors who were lost at sea and promised to offer a chapel to the first land they saw. The first hill they saw was Peninha, and there they built the promised chapel. Note the reference to certain numbers in these legends: 6 loaves of bread, 6 sailors, 3 disappearances of the image of the lady. The Odrinhas Museum preserves 3 ex-votos from the Peninha Chapel, one of which is in the shape of a boat, revealing the importance of this temple to the man of the sea. A third legend linked to the Peninha indicates that at the back of the chapel there is a stone with the footprints left by the donkey that carried Our Lady. When her image appeared and was placed in the chapel of Saint Saturnin below the Peninha crag, she wanted to return to the place of the donkey's footprints. Popular tradition associates these footprints with the idea that the water that accumulated inside them was holy. These depressions in the rock can still be seen in the vicinity of the chapel. The fame of the Peninha sanctuary grew, and the alms of many visitors enabled the chapel to be rebuilt. Around 1673, Brother Pedro da Conceição settled there, a hermit who would become closely linked to the history of Peninha. The stonemason was probably responsible for building the staircase that leads up to the chapel at the top of the cliff, replacing the previous one, which required a dangerous climb between the rocks. He is also credited with building the houses where the pilgrims were sheltered. In front of the chapel is the tombstone of Pedro da Conceição with the inscription, "Here lies the hermit of Our Lady of Peninha, Brother Pedro, asking for an Our Father and a Hail Mary for his benefactors." In the 18th century, the chapel received its splendid interior decoration, including the main altarpiece covered in marble inlays of various colors, the painting of the vault, the installation of a row of tiles by Master P.M.P., and the tile covering almost the entire chapel by António de Oliveira Bernardes. The houses built for the pilgrims in the 18th and 19th centuries were eventually ruined, and around 1918 the entrepreneur António Augusto de Carvalho Monteiro, who had a vast fortune and owned Quinta da Regaleira, bought the area to build another palace here. 3 houses were demolished and construction began on a new building designed by Júlio da Fonseca. On the south side, the loggia still stands out, with a Serlian arched window in the center and the battlements that crown the complex, giving it a castle-like appearance. Inside, the walls are lined with panels of tiles on the underside. This palace was left unfinished following the death of Carvalho Monteiro in 1920, and its next owner was also unable to finish the project as it was originally conceived. Below the cliff on which the chapel and palace of Peninha stands are the ruins of the chapel of Saint Saturnin. The original chapel was founded at an uncertain date, having been donated in 1192 to Pero Paes, second in command to King Afonso I of Portugal and son of Paio Soares and Chama Gomes. This donation was made by King Sancho I of Portugal, and Pero Paes was a highly esteemed and illustrious person in his time, having taken on the role of hermit here. However, since he didn't find the solitude he was looking for here, this religious man would later retire until his death to the monastery of São Vicente Fora in Lisbon, that inherited this chapel until 1834, when the religious orders were abolished. Archaeological excavations promoted by the Sintra Cascais Natural Park have revealed evidence of the foundations of this medieval building, located to the west of the chapel that we can still see. They also found a necropolis composed by graves dug into the rock, used between the 12th and 16th centuries, a pathway made of slabs and flanked by stone blocks, and a cistern carved into the rock in a semi-cylindrical shape. Until the end of the 14th century, the priority was to promote the settlement of the area, so Saint Saturnin was leased out to farmers. With the passage of time, it became an important pilgrimage point, which led to the need to rebuild the temple. The original building was demolished, and the chapel, whose ruins we can still see today, was built in the mid-16th century and remodeled in the 17th century. Despite the importance of this sacred place, the recurrence of episodes considered as profane during the nights led the priests of São Vicente Fora to close the chapel's doors in 1683, and its assets were distributed to nearby churches such as Alcabides. A beautiful tiled altar frontal from the chapel of Saint Saturnin, to which it had been given by the officers of the ship Nossa Senhora de Oliveira from Guimarães, dated 1639, can still be seen today in the National Tile Museum in Lisbon. This chapel's invocation to Saint Saturnin has aroused many doubts and quite a few theories. This saint, who lived in the 3rd century, was sent to Gaul, where, according to tradition, he became the first bishop of Toulouse and was martyred in 257. The origin of this invocation is obscure, as there is no known connection between this saint and the Sintra region. Perhaps that's why the possibility has already been suggested that there was a Roman shrine to the god Saturn here, his name later being confused with that of Saint Saturnin after the site was Christianized. With the construction of the Chapel of Our Lady of Peninha further up the hill, the Chapel of Saint Saturnin fell into abandonment and ruin. It was used as a dwelling and, until the 1960s, as a haystack. Today, little more remains than its exterior structure and roof, with no decoration inside apart from a small painted cross on the triumphal arch. The natural and monumental complex of Peninha is one of the most impressive sites in the Sintra Mountains, where stories, beliefs, legends, and perennial enigmas intersect and fascinate all those who visit it. Thank you for discovering Portugal with us. If you liked the video, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel to follow our new releases.